It's on already.
Babatunde Oshadare is a lawyer who is passionate about providing legal and commercial solutions wherever required. He has worked and advised in the delivery of various transactions across several sectors, including power, oil, gas, real estate, corporate finance, dispute resolution, and business startup advisory. He is highly emotionally intelligent and able to utilize his skill in providing bespoke solutions to clients. His courtroom advocacy and alternative dispute resolution skills are excellent in providing solutions that clients require. Part of his works include providing advice in the management of severance and gratuity payments to staff, issuance of new employment contracts for retained employees, negotiating and documenting new conditions of service, managing codes of conduct and disciplinary issues, and managing dispute resolution emanating therefrom. In view of his passion for the energy sector, he has continued to provide legal and regulatory advice. Babatunde is currently the Chief Legal and Regulatory Officer for Ikeja Electric PLC. He provides dynamic leadership for his team of lawyers handling various matters from contract and corporate advisory, litigation, regulatory and corporate governance. The work of his team has been recognized within the energy community, having won the Esquire 2019 In-House Energy Team of the Year. He holds a law degree from the University of Lagos, as well as a master's degree in international business transactions from the world-renowned Center for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral Law and Policy, University of Dundee, UK. Babatunde has written many articles and he is a member of several professional associations. With Jesus' joy in our heart and the shout of praise in our mouth, let's make welcome Barrister Babatunde Oshadare.
Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Praise Jesus. Hallelujah. Thank you very much. Please, we may be seated. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. We are not of the world, but we live in the world. And it is deliberately designed that way by the Most High God. So that if we expand our capacities, we can maximize the fullness thereof in the world. Pastor talked earlier about being globally relevant. There are so many things that are happening around us in the world today that as Christians, we must be mindful of. We must be aware of these things for us to live a fulfilled life. If you remember 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in your mind, just like yesterday, right? And we keep planning and planning to plan for the next 5 years, 10 years. They ask us, where do you see yourself in 10 years, in 20 years, right? A lot of us don't have that picture. And that's why it's important to have a life plan. What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? Where is your source? What are the things you want to become? Organizations have 100-year plans. Countries have 100-year plan, right? Nigeria as well, I believe we have 200-year plan. God will help us. So this morning, beyond church, there are other pillars of the society. I mean, we talk about church, religion, culture, politics, the marketplace, business. These are other pillars of the society. And that's why for me this morning, I'm very deeply inspired by what I have seen in this church, where you are talking about businesses, investments, you're talking about medicals, health issues, finance issues, empowering people. For me, I am deeply inspired. And that's why you should not take what you have for granted. You shouldn't. They say that familiarity does what? It breeds contempt. Mike Murdock would say that it's the anointing that you respect, that you what? That you attract. Very critical. And that's why for me this morning, I would like to specially recognize and appreciate the man of God, our Daddy Gio. The set man over this house, the visionary over this house. Please celebrate him. Please celebrate him. Please keep it going, please. You don't understand. Thank you very much. There are not too many places you go to where you have dedicated on a Sunday to talk about matters like this, beyond church, beyond religion, beyond Christianity, and the essence of our faith. Today we are talking about legal issues. Last week it was medical. There are not too many places you go to. And that's because the visionary understands the importance of empowering the people to go into what? The world. And do what? Maximize, conquer, take dominion, expand, multiply. That is the injunction of God. And that's why it is critical. And again, I want to appreciate him one more time. Thank you very much, sir. And of course, I also want to appreciate Pastor Adenike Emmanuel, also for the support. That because without her, I strongly believe that the greatness that you see today would not have manifested that much. And that's critically important in the life of any man. Our daddy was 50. He's come here to appreciate the entire family and how far the wife has been supportive. Very inspirational. And the Bible says that one will conquer 1,000 and two will do what? And it is even more critical in geometric proportion in the institution of marriage. It's not something that we should take for granted. Thank you very much. I'd also like to especially appreciate the legal department. My learned colleagues, where are they? Thank you very much for inviting me to talk about today issues around contracts. It is very timely, very critical, very important at a time like this that people are aware and knowledgeable about the importance of contracts. Before we go into the issues around contracts in the place of work, I'm going to talk very briefly about some foundational matters. And I'm also very excited this morning that Pastor has done an awesome job in the first service about these foundational matters. And if you are not here in the first service, I want to beg you, please help yourself to listen to that message, because it's part of what we are going to be building on in this second service, talking about contracts. Today, we say that the world has changed, or that the world is changing. What is changing about the world? The world of 50 years ago is not the same world of today. A lot has changed. Globalization. The world has become what? A small village where people can move from one border to another border. Like Pastor said earlier, you can be in this location and then you are what? You are globally relevant. Whether it's in place of work where you do not have to be there physically to work and earn a living, or whether it's in a place of advisory or freelancing, whatever it is, the world has become borderless, in quotes. And that's why, like you said, whatever it is you can do to remove the limitations created by man, please do so. It is very important. Now, as the world is advancing, we had the first industrial revolution, now to the fourth industrial revolution, so many things have changed, right? But there's continuous advancements in technology, which is aiding globalization. You can send a tweet now, and somebody in the farthest corner of the world is responding. You are engaging to just one little message. It is very, very critical, very important that we are abreast of these issues. In the world of work, it's also affected because the ease with which people can move around today, right, is also affecting the world of work that we used to know. Very important. Pastor talked about Japa, the Japa movement. It is real. That is one of the major challenges today of every HR practitioner. Thinking about, oh, my staff are leaving. My staff are leaving. Where am I going to get replacements? But the truth of the matter is that it's not everybody that is entering into the Japa movement for so many reasons, like Pastor said earlier. People Japa for various reasons, economic, health, whatever, so many reasons. But the point is that that also creates opportunity for people, right, to take up opportunities being left by others, right? But the question then is, are we ready? Are we ready? As employers, for us to be relevant, to be competitively relevant, we must continue to adapt and find new ways of doing business, find new ways of running our organization to be a lot more competitive. Competitive, not against your fellow business in the same industry. You want to have the market share in that industry. That's fantastic. But even beyond that, you also want to be competitively positioned so that what? You can attract the best of talents. And beyond attracting the best of talents, you also want to be able to retain them. In the banking industry today, IT talent is a big issue. Why? Because they are all leaving for so many reasons. In the health sector, the doctors, they are all leaving. Why? You go to hospitals today and you hardly find experienced people to attend to you. It is real. The challenge is real. So that competitive advantage, we must, whether as employer or as employee, we must be positioned to take advantage. The space is irrelevant. Whether you're in Nigeria or Kenya, wherever you are, that space is irrelevant. The issue is whether you are globally relevant, whether you can play on that global stage. As employees, one of the key things that you must do is to what? Expose yourself with knowledge. And that's why all of the series and teachings in this house, you should not take it for granted. People pay to get those things, but largely it is free. Maybe because it is free, some of us don't appreciate it because it doesn't cost us anything. But if you ask Pastor, it has cost him influence, reputation, to be able to attract people to come to this house. And he has built that influence over the years. It didn't just start today. So we should not take it for granted. Expose yourself to knowledge. Skill up. Skill up. Whatever industry that you play, whatever your profession, trade, lawyer, medical, businessman, you can learn new skills. One of the dangers of today of the world is ability to unlearn things that we have been, forced to learn while we were growing up. To unlearn those things and open yourself to learn new things, new ways of doing business, new ways of learning, new ways of providing a service. Very, very important. That way, you can become relevant. You can become competitive in all that you do. Now, I wouldn't talk so much about the Japa movement because Pastor already dealt with that excellently well, right? And it is the reality of today. And the fact that we need to position ourselves irrelevant to be able to take up opportunities. They said that opportunity must be taken up what? In the lifetime of that opportunity. After it goes, then you must wait for that opportunity circle to come back again. Are we together? Hello, church, are we together? All right, just follow me. We're going on an exciting journey this morning. So, we talk about skilling up. And after you have skilled up, you are brilliant, intelligent, resourceful. Are you marketable? Employability skills. It is hard work to get a job or a good job. It is hard work. For some people, you get it on a platter of gold. Somebody will just write a note. Oh yeah, go and meet Senator so and so. And then you are in. With contract or without contract, you are in the system. But it is a skill that must also be developed to be able to get good positions. And how do you do that? You have already skilled up. you are knowledgeable, you are brilliant. You now need to market yourself. How would people know that you play in a particular space? How would they know if you don't market? Right? Some people don't even have CVs, resumes. They don't have. Oh, can you send me your CV? Can I get it in the next 10 minutes or 1 hour? They say, oh, sorry, sir. When I get home, I will go and write it. I will go and... Okay, are you really ready? Are you really ready? You don't have professional profiles. Nobody knows what you do. Nobody knows. So it is important that you're also able to market yourself, you're able to position yourself to be identified by people who are looking for skilled professionals to take up specific roles. Very, very important. So the next thing we'll talk about, yes, we work. We have businesses that we run. We do so much from morning to night, weekends. We hardly go on holidays. It is critically important to also consider that the body is a machine. If you don't service it well, if you don't maintain it well, it will collapse, just like any car or any machine that is not maintained. And so it is important to consider in all that we do, the place of work and the place out of work, work-life balance. It's very common today. But how many people actually take out time to take importance or to make it important, to also balance things that are outside of their professional calling? A lot of time, where are you? Oh, I'm at work. Where are you? I'm in the office. Are you going to be able to take the children to school tomorrow? Or tomorrow is the open day. Are you available? No, I have to be at work. No. So there's no place for family, for bonding. Some people don't even know their children have grown up in the last few years, and all of a sudden you have grown children. You don't even know your children. Why? Because you have not paid close attention to them while growing up. And so that's very, very, very important. For spouses, very critical that you don't take relationship, friends and family for granted. It's also very, very important. And so the next thing I would also be talking, for some people, it's about, without you, the job cannot be done. Who says so? If you fall sick tomorrow and you can't go to the office, is the company going to collapse? It won't collapse. The best that will happen, because, oh, you're a very sociable, friendly person, maybe at a particular point in time in the course of the day, you would have what? 1 minute silence to the soul of the departed. So you don't take these things for granted. When the chips are down, who will be there for you? It's your family, your wife, your husband. That will be there, and your close friends. So you don't take it for granted. Micromanaging, you want to do everything yourself. No, allow other people to grow as well. Your team members, your managers, let them learn the ropes. They can make mistakes. Take it as a learning opportunity for them to develop, such that if you are not there in your business, the business can run for 6 months. If you are not there physically, because what? You have systems and you have structures in place for an organization to run itself. As an employer, you can afford to take a vacation for 3 months in a year without looking back. You just go, enjoy yourself, relax yourself. After all, that's why you own the business. That's why you are working so hard. But if you don't have the system, you don't have the structure, then you cannot do that. You can't do that. So it is very important that we take that very seriously. And then finally, on foundational matters, a lot of us say the reason that we work is what? It's for my family. It's for my children. I want to give them what? The best education. I want them to have a good life. We are building wealth for our family. That is very important. The Bible says that a good man, a good woman will do what? He will leave an inheritance. Not just for his what? Not just for his children, but for his children's children. That also takes a great deal of skill for you to be able to do that. A great deal of skill. So anything can happen, an unforeseen event. God forbid, Somebody gets sick and that is it. Or an accident happens and then you are not there. What happens to the people that you have left behind? Your family. What happens? Who takes care of them? Depending on the family, a lot of things start to happen. Family may move in and there's war in the family over what? Assets that they have not worked for. That they were not there when you were toiling with your immediate family to build the wealth. Others will come to claim ownership, possession. So it's important that we also bear this in mind as we advance in our professional career. You have to save for the rainy day. You have assets that you can easily turn into a liquid asset in case of emergency, right? You have insurance, life insurance, education insurance. There are professionals who offer these services. These are things to be considered, right? And then we talk about next of kin, part of administration of estate. A lot of us today will say, who is your next of kin? Oh, it's my husband, it's my wife, or my first son. For some people, it's their parents, right? That is their next of kin, or uncle. Now, in the place of work, how important it is to have a next of kin. It is important because in the event of an emergency, your next of kin is your first point of call. That person that can provide information, that person that can grant consent, right, where you are indisposed. That person that will be the liaison person, the go-to person that the organization can reach out to if something happens. It is very important. Now, a next of kin doesn't give you a right to inherit the assets of the person, right? Because there are other ways, legal instruments, that you can inherit assets or property. Now, some organizations would allow, if there are entitlements to be paid off to family members, some organizations are liberal to want to pay to a next of kin. And that's why, as part of the pack of HR documents, some organizations would ask you, who is your next of kin? If something happens, how would you want us to disburse your entitlements, right? Some employees will say, oh, give 50% to my wife, 70% to my wife, my mother, 10%. Some organizations are that flexible. But for some others, they are not. If you don't have a will or a letter of administration, they will not listen to you. So legally, it is not critically important, right? Now, in estate administration, you want to talk about wills, right? You want to talk about letter of administration. You want to talk about company and shareholding. Some people do that. Some people create trusts where the family or become beneficiary under that trust. It's a very unique, interesting subject, but we don't have time to go into details today. And for organization, it is important to have a BCP, a business continuity plan. When something happens, the building, the office gets burnt, how do you quickly recover and recommence businesses? How do you recover? We saw what happened when there was total lockdown during COVID. Till today, a lot of businesses did not survive because of that lockdown. They have not returned to the start or the point where they were before COVID happened. At the same time, some people took advantage of COVID. Why? Because they were ready, they were prepared for that time. Zoom, typical example. Offices, started having meetings and all that via Zoom while employees were at home, and they were able to function and have the organization run remotely. And that's why today, the world of work has also adapted in such a way that organizations now have remote work policy. And that's part of being competitive, where you can attract talent and the employees are asking you, oh, do you have a remote work policy? Can I work 2 days at home and come to the office 3 days? Or is it 1 day at home? And some employees will say, no, I'd rather go to that other company where I have that opportunity. It's also important that we start to think about that as employers. Are we together? All right, moving on very quickly about contract issues. The legal and regulatory framework, there are so many laws dealing with contracts, from the Industrial Act, the Labor Act. There's no time to talk deeply into what they are and what they cover at today's meeting. Maybe some other time we'll look at that. Entering into employment contract, typically there will be a JD, a job description that is put together. A position needs to be filled, an advertisement is made, people apply for the job, CVs are shortlisted, interviews are done, and successful candidates, HR will get to them and say, oh, come and go for medicals. Why is medical important as part of that recruitment process? Why? Because employers want to know that you are fit and sound to be able to discharge the responsibilities of that role, and at least to know your health baseline at the time of employment, so that if you need help in the course of work, your employer is well informed to know that, oh, you have certain challenges and you require help and things like that, right? But most importantly, as employers, we also have to be very careful so that we are not faced with issues around discrimination on health grounds. An employee has gone for medicals, and they said, oh, that employee has failed. And you then call the potential staff and say, oh, sorry, we can't go ahead with you anymore. You are not fit and proper. You failed your medical. They said you have HIV. How? So HR practitioners, they have a duty to ensure that they protect their organizations from those sort of issues that can lead to people making claim that, oh, their fundamental right not to be discriminated against is being breached by a potential employer, right? So that's very important. And then an offer is made to you, and that is the point where you want to read your contract. For some people, they are too excited that, oh, an offer has been made, the next thing, sign. You read the contract, look at the terms and conditions. You may even need to get somebody to help you to review. Can I sign this? What are the implications if I sign? And that is the time to what? To negotiate your pay for the value that you are bringing on board to the organization. You negotiate. It's a marketplace. How much is this? Oh, it's 100K. Can I pay 70? No, the money is too small. I think I want 200. That is the point to negotiate. The moment you sign and you resume, 1 week after, it's not the time to say, this work is too hard. Oh. Hey, somebody will die here. Oh. And then you're going to meet your guy and say, this work, I didn't know that it's like this. Oh. My salary is too small. Oga, you just signed the contract. You've not even done confirmation. You are still on probation. You're already arguing about salary. No, it is the time for you to negotiate as passed. But at the point where you have now proven yourself, confirmed, and a lot depends on you, and you can command value, then you can go back and say, sir, we need to look at this issue of remuneration again, confidently. That's because you know the value that you are bringing to the table at that point in time. So it's very important. Before you even sign, very critical to do due diligence about the organization you are going to join. Who is this organization? What do they do? What are they like? What is their culture? What are the things that are valuable to them, that they hold dear? Do they value their employees? Do they train their employees? Are they interested in the success, in the family of their employees? That is the time to consider those things, because it's very important. And some people that I know would rather take a less paying job because of this type of issues. Very, very critical. So let's move on. The employment contract itself, typically, the clauses that you would find, the parties, the nature of the job, description, what are you going to be doing, remuneration, the hour, how many hours of work are you going to be doing every week, per day, work outside, official work hours, is there going to be allowance, paid overtime, things like that. These are typical things that you find. Probation period. If you want to terminate the contract, how many weeks notice must you give? 1 month, 3 months. Those are the things that you typically find in your employment contracts. So moving on. In the course of work, organizations have policies, SLAs, that govern how they expect employees to work, the relationship between the parties. There are so many of them, but I've just chosen to mention one, which is issue around harassment in the workplace, bullying in the workplace, discrimination in the workplace, where without hiding it, there is preference for one staff somewhere. Anything that staff says, your guy agrees. And somebody else is talking, will you shut up? What do you know? Right? In the place of work, a line manager sees a subordinate and says, come here. Why are you walking like that? Think you're supposed to be walking anywhere in this office, shaking everything. Brotherly. In the place of work, that is harassment. That is harassment. And as employers, we have a duty to all employees, even to the company that we own, the organization. We have a duty to put in place protective measures to guard against things like that. If somebody leaves the organization having felt bullied, before they come to work, they are fidgeting. Hey, I'm going to work today again. What am I going to meet? And they get to work, they are trying to sneak into their office. Why? Why? Someone said you should not go to a place or work in a place where you are not celebrated. You shouldn't. If you work in such an environment, perhaps it's time for you to consider leaving. Go to a place where you can flourish, where you are encouraged to maximize your best, where you are encouraged to make mistakes and learn from that mistake and become better the following day. That is the kind of environment you want. And employers also have a duty to ensure that type of environment exists. If you don't, you will be held liable in vicarious liability, where if an employee leaves and says, I was bullied or sexually harassed, I didn't feel safe going to work anymore, and so that amounts to unfair dismissal, unlawful dismissal, and they are claiming compensation, damages against the company. It's not the MD, the owner of the company, that offended. It's one of the managers that did so. But because the employer did not do anything, that employer will be vicariously liable to pay compensation to that type of employee who feels aggrieved and had to leave that organization. Are we together? So let's go. In every relationship, sometimes there's time to say bye-bye. And this is very critical, very important for this discussion. And there are many ways in the place of work. An employee, you have a right to leave by exercising what is in your contract. You resign. You terminate your relationship with your employer. The employer also has the right, opportunity, to terminate and say, sorry, I don't think we can continue to work for various reasons, right? And the relationship comes to an end. It can be resignation, it can be redundancy because things are not looking good or your role has become redundant and you need to go. And it can also be retirement, when you are getting old and you are no longer able to. And who says that when you are 60 or 65, you are no longer able to contribute meaningfully to that organization? Who says? And that's why in other parts of the world today, they encourage their older citizens to remain at work. Let them continue to add economic value to their society and country and not go back to the dependent line, benefit line. Are we together? All right, let's run. So, contracts can be terminated when the notice period expires. If it's a term contract, when the time expires, the contract expires. You give your notice, and at the end of the notice period, we say bye-bye. It is important for us to comply in every contract with the notice period. Very, very important. And if you want to dispense with the notice period, your contract says, if you want to leave, give me 30 days notice, right? Yes, I've given 30 days notice. At the end of the 30 days, I leave. But if you don't even want to give 30 days notice, then you have to do what? Payment in lieu of that notice. So because you have not given me that notice, you would have to pay for that notice. And if it's the employer that wants you to leave and the employer is not giving you notice, the employer would also be what? Making payment for that notice that has not been given to you. Now, that payment that an employer is supposed to give an employee has to be done concurrently at the point where you are leaving. It cannot be deferred. So the employer cannot say, okay, be going, your terminal benefits, I'll pay you later. If that happens, then it becomes unlawful termination of employment. And an employee can bring up a case for damages, compensation, as the case may be. Right? Now, it's also very important that the moment notice has been given, that notice is instrumental and critical. You cannot withdraw it. It severs the employment relationship. And it's also very important to understand that it is not relevant or necessary to formally accept a notice of resignation. So an employee can just decide that, look, I'm not going to work tomorrow. And he sends an email to HR, to the line manager, says, I'm no longer interested in working, right? Depending on what your contract says, whether notice is required or not. And that is the end. The requirement to say, oh, okay, I accept your resignation, or I do not accept the resignation, it doesn't arise. There's nothing like that, right? So let us run. It is important for us to know also that when it comes to termination of employment, it is now required that a reason must be given. A reason must be given. It used to be that in the past, you don't need to give any reason to fire somebody. You don't need to. And the law used to be that an employer can fire you for no reason, for a good reason, or for a bad reason. Once they say go, that is the end. But today, the law has changed because the playing field, employer-employee, right, traditionally it's believed that the employer has the better advantage, right? And so the advancement in law, right, over the time, over decades, is being to continue to find ways to protect the interests of employees in the place of work. And that's why today there must be reason given, right, when an employee is being let go. And that's very, very important. Now, what are the typical reasons that must be given? They are usually around misconduct, poor performance, redundancy. So that if your role has become redundant, then perhaps it's time to go and maybe you are paid redundancy compensation. Or poor performance, you are not doing well in the place of work. So that may be a reason for you to go, right? And gross misconduct, if you misbehave, the employer has a right to fire you and let you know that this is why I fired you. You need to go. Right, so these are things that we must bear in mind in the place of work. Usually, if the reasons are, if they fall outside this issue of poor performance, redundancy, misconduct, then as employers, we must be careful in ensuring that we don't run foul and fall into the trap of unfair dismissal, unlawful termination, and things like that. And that's why, for employers, it's very important that we document, and document. Don't just tell an employee, this is your daily task, let it be in writing. Have set KPIs, performance indicators, very key. And you can measure, you can track. Let the KPIs be smart. At the end of the month, you can do a review. These are the things you are supposed to deliver. Have you done them? Why haven't you performed? Have it documented, because you may need it. Very important, because that's the only way you can protect yourself as an employer. When an employee comes against you to say, unlawful termination, unfair dismissal. If you don't have these things documented as an employer, then you leave yourself open to all sorts. And when you go to the court, the sentiment is usually in favor of the employee. Why? Because of that unequal, unfair bargaining power, that unlevel playing field. Are we together? All right, we're running. Termination. We've spoken about it. An employer also has the right to dismiss an employee. What's the difference between termination and dismissal? Dismissal is usually triggered for bad behavior. When by your conduct, that trust, that confidence that the employer reposed in you, you cross the red line fundamentally by misbehaving, stealing, dereliction of duty. You are taking drugs in the place of work, bribery, insubordination, corruption. You convert property, company assets, assault, battery. Those are red lines that as employees you cannot cross. If you cross those lines, the employer can dismiss you, and dismiss you well, and state the reason why you have been dismissed. And so it's important for us to be very, very careful. Now, even in the place of dismissal, as employees, you have a right to fair hearing, the right to be heard. It's a constitutional right. When you have been accused of doing something wrong, you have a right to defend yourself. So you must be given an opportunity to defend yourself. Very important. And even if you are going to be dismissed summarily, there must still be some form of opportunity for you to defend yourself. Of course, the weight of evidence will be there, such that at the end of that meeting, you can be laid off with a letter formally issued, right? And that's what summary dismissal is about, where your conduct is so grave in nature that anyone, an objective person, listening, looking at you, they say, no, this is unacceptable behavior, and you can be fired instantly, right? So you must be mindful of these things. Sometimes misconduct can also border on criminality. Maybe you have stolen company money. You have battered somebody, assault. That's a crime. Before now, it must be that before an employer can discipline you, before they can let you go, terminate, dismiss, whatever it is, right? You must have been tried by the court of competent jurisdiction before now. But now, that is no longer required. The employer, independently of whatever is going on in the law enforcement side, the employer can also carry out their internal disciplinary measure to dismiss you for bad behavior based on available evidence. Are we together? So that is very, very important to understand that distinction. Like I mentioned earlier, an employee must be given a right to be heard. Okay, these are the things that you have done. Is it true? Defend yourself. And at the end of that opportunity, a decision is taken for you to go. It's part of the rights that employers must accord employees, the right of fair hearing. And it's not something to be overlooked. Now, in crafting a dismissal letter, or even a termination letter, because you must state a reason, you then must be careful in how you state that reason, because of the recognized reasons that you must give, right? The reasons must what? They must be justifiable. Not just frivolous reasons. To say, oh, we have surplus staff, we don't need you anymore, go. No. The employer must be careful in drafting that letter. So if you need to get your legal team to look at it, by all means, do before you let it out, because it can become an issue as per unfair termination and things like that. Are we together? Now, it also happens in the place of work where the environment is so toxic. Toxic environment, where an employee no longer feels safe, no longer feels comfortable. The person is being threatened, harassed on a daily basis. They are afraid to come to work. And the employee feels that, look, it's time for me to go. That can also be deemed as constructive dismissal. You have not actually dismissed the person, but you have made life unbearable for the person to want to continue in that employment. Constructive dismissal. So we must be careful when things like that are happening, because an employee can come back to say, look, I have been constructively dismissed, and they want to claim compensation from that organization. Are we together? All right. Another principle that we mentioned earlier is an employee can resign appointments at any time, right? An employer can also exercise the right at any time, because it is said that you cannot force a willing employer on an unwilling employee and vice versa. Resignation must be in line with the terms of the contracts, right? So that if you leave and you exercise your rights, you give a 1 month notice, that is fine. If your contract says it's 3 month notice, you cannot give a 1 month or you just disappear. You must give the right notice. If you don't give that notice, you would have to pay your employer. Also, resignation. We have said you cannot reject a resignation letter. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've said you cannot reject a resignation letter. The moment it is issued, it is issued. And it also happens that sometimes an employer says you cannot resign. Why? Because there's a disciplinary action that is ongoing, or an investigation into an act of impropriety that is ongoing. And so if you want to resign, the employer says, no, you are going nowhere. How do you manage things like that? We must understand as well that the moment somebody says, I'm leaving, you can't force stop that person from leaving. If you do, the courts will say, oh, it amounts to unfair labor practices. It's within the person's right and prerogative to want to leave. If you have other issues against the person, then follow other available remedy. An employer always has remedy. An employer is not without remedy. If the person has done something wrong, you have a criminal investigation that is ongoing. Conclude your investigation. Document it. Send a copy to the person, wherever they are, their last known address. Put it in their file. When it comes to time for reference to be issued, you state it clearly in their reference. You can report to the law enforcement agencies. Let them arrest the person wherever the person is. Let them do the investigation. You can prosecute the person as an employer. If the person has an entitlement, you can withhold it or set off sometimes, or withhold that entitlement, as part of remedying the damage caused by that employee who has left. And the moment an employee resigns, an employer cannot say, I hereby terminate your employment. Because the moment the resignation letter is submitted, there's nothing left on the table to be terminated. Are we together? Right, so these are key fundamental principles that sometimes we get emotional, we get sentimental, and we want to take certain reactions. That's why it's always important to run things through your legal team. We've talked about disciplinary issues and options open to an employer. And this is very important, particularly if it's a misbehavior, gross misconduct, criminal in nature. You can get law enforcement agencies involved to take care of matters for you. And then damages. If an employment has been found to be unlawfully terminated, of course, the person may be entitled to damages. It used to be in the past that damages would be quantified based on the person's 1 month salary. But today, based on advancements and adoption of international labor best practices, a court is at liberty to award damages that they believe is suitable to remedy a wrong that has been made. And that's where we're going to stop today. Thank you very much. So, like our daddy said earlier, if you have questions, it's the expectation that you have written them down. Such that if we can't take them today, Wednesday service is there for us to address all the concerns, all the issues. God bless you real good. Thank you, sir, for having me, sir. Thank you so much.